Oh, you're in for a longer episode today, boys and gals. I do apologise. I'm on the iPhone microphone, but I've got my Bose CQC headphones on. So yeah, I'm plugged into the wall. That's why I'm not using the microphone, because I've got to plug the wireless microphone transmitter into the lightning port on my phone. But also, it's good because I've got a USB adapter for that, and I'm actually going to put all that into my I'm going to put it into my my cables box. All the podcasting gear will go into my old cables box for the time being, because I don't have another box as of yet. When I do get another box, I'll put all of the stuff, because I'm going to try and find an old glasses case as well that I'm not using, so I can put the adapters into the glasses case, and then hopefully... Anyway. But I'm plugged into the walls, hence why I'm not using... Even though I did say on the actual episode, which I've pre-recorded before this, that we do go into, after this intro, we go into the intro, which talks... in the intro, it talks... very much, sorry, after the intro, the actual episode, the meat and potato of it, I do talk about the headphone, doing it from the microphone. But I'm recording this. I recorded it yesterday on Saturday afternoon in the kitchen. It's now Sunday afternoon. I'm now sat on my bedroom floor in front of my record box, and I don't know why I'm saying that, because you can't even see where it is. But anyway, so yeah, I'm sat in front of my record box, and I'm going to I've got jobs to do, and while I'm doing my jobs, I'm going to record the actual episode onto this. Just adds to the rest of this bit. So yeah, I did promise about the microphone, but I didn't, so I should have written a note, but never mind. What I will say is this, that I do apologise that I didn't plug the microphone in, but I'm charging the phone, the battery's low, so I can't plug the microphone in. So you're just going to get the old audio that you had from old podcasts. But again, when I recorded yesterday, I was using my AirPods in voice memos, because with this app, I haven't updated it yet, so I can't use my AirPods. But still, I do think the AirPods don't really do justice as much, which you will hear on the episode. Now, the episode's going to be long, because we're going nostalgic. We're going to be talking about old TV and old... There's more to come on old media, I think. Lost media as well. And yes. And another thing as well, just before I get past this bit, I will be doing notes on my podcast. Me and Andy, who I do my imaginary friend who I do the podcast with. I know this isn't the Imaginary Friends channel, but he is on this podcast, and we are going to be doing another podcast this week. We've decided that Wednesday evenings are going to be the podcast evening where we do the podcast, but the next podcast he won't be on. We're doing 2 podcasts this week. We're doing 2 podcasts on Wednesday, because I'm doing one for... Yeah, we're doing 2 podcasts. We're doing one... I'm doing 2 podcasts, one for this channel and one for the other channel. The podcast that I should have been doing for the other channel. So anyway, now, before I start, here's a call to... Well, not a call to action. Actually, no, I will do a call to action. Facebook.com/BeansWorld77. There is going to be talk about the website there. I am going to be do communal posting on here about the podcast and also on my Instagram as well, if people want to know. But also on my Facebook, there'll be more information about the brand spanking new website, which will have a bit of a team and behind it, I think, because it's a personal website. It's my own little corner on the internet. It is not social media. I repeat, it is not social media. Everything we put on that website, there will be nowhere you can comment. Nowhere at all. If you want to message, if you want to DM me in the future, the best way to do it will be on TikTok. Because even though I look at messages on Facebook, I'm going to turn that feature off when the website goes live, because I'm only going to look at messages. I'm still keeping the Facebook page, but I'm no longer DMing people on Facebook. If you want to DM me, TikTok is your best bet for DMing for Beans World. Yeah. There will be an email address as well at some point for those people who really want to get in contact. But yeah. So we do have shout-outs. We got a new member of the Beans World family, and her name is Nicola Silcock. Yes, she is that Nicola Silcock that has Funland. She is that very person. So welcome aboard, Nicola. Welcome aboard the Beans World family. I did give Serena a shout-out, didn't I? If not, I'll give Serena a shout-out right here as well. But first, Nicola, here's your super shout-out. People, you should go and check out Funland. It is a really good place. In fact, no, it's not a good place. It's a splendid place. You should go check it out. Some great fruit machines in there, arcade machines. If you're a Beans World fan, they've got some great machines like Guitar Hero, and they've got Sega Rally, and they've got some 2P machines in there, and you can win some awesome prizes and stuff like that. And yeah, so yeah, go and check out that place, and go and buy an ice cream. Yeah, because that was what I wanted to say. She does. We've not tried them yet, but she does amazing ice creams. The best ice cream in the world. There you go. If you haven't had a super shout out before, then you are now. And if you're gonna go buy an ice cream, say that podcaster, that Beans World podcaster, sent me to buy an ice cream. And I have to just buy an ice cream just because I've heard it saying I've got to go and buy an ice cream. If you're listening to this on your Bluetooth speaker in the car, because I know some people do, and you're passing Funland as you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, because some people do listen to YouTube in the car, funnily enough. If you listen to this in the car and you're thinking, I'm really hungry, I could just do with an ice cream now, why not visit Funland and get your ice cream now? There's no special offer. We'll have to do one, won't we? We'll have to do one. Maybe, I don't know how we're going to do that one, but yeah. Anyways. Yeah. So anyway, that was the big shout out. Oh yeah, and then Serena is, I think she's a disc jockey now. She has her name on the carousel. And by the way, I think you should go and check the carousel out. We were going to go on when they had like an adult thing. But yeah, the carousel, go check it out. It's an amazing ride. They've just redone the organ on there. It's still a proper barrel organ, but they've redone all the workings on there. They've redecorated it. They've made it look all spick and spam, But yeah, a big shout out to Serena, who is now a disc jockey. I don't know what else she does, but her name is on the carousel because Herbert was the grandfather. And in fact, we did an article for something that's never. I don't think it's really actually surfaced, but there you have it. Yes, so welcome aboard the Beans World family. And the Beans World family, for anyone that doesn't know and people want to know, it's just a group of people who we give shout outs to every week. Still giving shout outs to Jamie Vondy, who is working his arse off. Also his brother Steve, who, Also the guys at Toys R Us that sponsored the Monster Truck show. I forgot to give them a shout out last time. And also a big shout out to Hot Wheels Monster Trucks. Wow, this is becoming a massive shout out, isn't it? I don't think Hot Wheels Monster Trucks are Beansworld family members, but they should. I think they should. Yeah, definitely. But we've given them a big shout out. If you are a driver of a Hot Wheels monster truck, we'd love to hear from you. Also, a big shout out to anyone else who wants a shout out, really. The thing is, right, if you want a shout out on this podcast, right, what you've got to do is there's quite a few ways you can do it. In the comment section of this channel, of this podcast, you can go on down, and in the notes we'll put this as well. Down below in the comments, you can leave a comment and state if you want a shout out or not, right? You can also go on tiktok.com/Stephen Ball Beansworld 77. Sorry, I didn't do that well. tiktok.com/Stephen Ball Beansworld 77. Now, my account is no longer a business account, unfortunately, but this is where we take the messages. DM or you can comment on any one of my TikTok videos. Say if you want a shout out on there, and we'll do a shout out. Because obviously I don't know who wants or doesn't want a shout out. Actually, I do know who wants a shout out. Becky and Jess and Sue from Clitheroe Stones Painting. They are marvellous. They are absolutely wonderful people. I love them so nearly and dearly from the bottom of my heart. That was a bit personal. But they are part of the podcast. They're part of, Now, there's a few people who want a shout out every week. That's Nana. She's not my Nana by blood, but we call her Nana. It's a long story. I'm not going into that because it would be 3 hours long. But yeah, big shout out to Nana. She's Jamie Vondy's Nana, but we call her Nan. Over here at Beans World, we call her. She's quite funny, actually. Quite human. We might get her on the podcast one of these days. Oh my word. A big shout out to Nana. And there was someone else, but I've forgotten. You'll have to leave your name in the comments, but I have forgotten. So there you go. There's all the shout outs done. So we're now going to go into the body of the podcast now. And I really hope you enjoy this because this is an amazing, it's nostalgia or it's nostalgic, to say the least. So I'll shut up now and I'll just let the podcast do what it needs to do. Hey friends, because my phone is a bit low on battery, I'm having to use my AirPods and a different recording app to get so we're not I'm not basically, I'm trying to sort the audio out for you guys. So if it's a bit echoey, it's because I'm sat at the kitchen table for the first part of this. And then I'm going to move upstairs and do the second part of this. And in this episode, I did the intro with the proper mic. Because I was recording these episodes on a Thursday, but I'm now recording them on a Friday. Well, actually, I'm recording this a bit later, a bit earlier in the week because I'm going out on Friday evening, so I won't be able to sort the podcast out on Friday evening. But don't worry, you'll get it. So, in this episode of the Beans World app, I wanted to talk to you about early culture, early cartoons, and yeah. Now, just a bit of a disclosure for those who will remember that childhood, it will be ruined, just to warn you. Another thing as well, I'm also going to cover a little bit of internet stuff in this as well, and kind of because I did ask the thing in YouTube, I asked YouTube a question on what I should do an episode on it. I kind of suggested this really, and I think you guys would probably want this as a whole for an episode. So I've got no script. I don't really need one. I'm actually going to go back and tell you what it was like. What it was like growing up. We're going to go from the late 90s to the early 2000s, probably up to the 2010s. A real good era. I'll probably not do the 2010s in this. We'll probably do 2010s another episode because um, that was when I started listening to dance music, and that culture will be another episode. So we'll do the 90s to the 2000s. What was television like? What was it like growing up in the early 2000s, in the late 90s and the early 2000s? Well, it was a pretty cool era as a whole, basically. TV, I'm going to start back, not when Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, but I'm going to go back to late 90s because I started watching television in the late 90s. I wasn't just watching cartoons, I was watching a lot of adult shows. When I mean adult shows, I don't mean X-rated. I mean shows that mum and dad used to watch. So I would watch things like Faulty Towers. Um, what was the other one? Um, Friends. I'm not a big Friends fan, but I saw a few episodes. I tried to get into it. Um, what else was on? Star Trek, Stargate. Um, ooh, there was a police show. I can't remember what it was called in the late 90s. Um, and yeah, all that sort of stuff. There was the soaps, Brookside and Coronation Street. And just to clarify, when I started getting into watching television, there was no internet. Well, there was, but the internet, when I started, um, like, and this will clarify, I'm going to do another episode about the internet entirely, but I think we will discuss the internet very briefly in this. The internet, when I started watching television, which was the late 90s, only very few people had the internet. If you had the internet in 97, 98, which is when I started watching television, um, you were the thing. You were the bee's knees. If you had the internet, everyone, you had friends. You You had real friends. You know, you were the cool kid in the class. The cool kid had the best modem, the best video games. That was it. You were around their house for hours. Um, it didn't mean that they were into the best music, but they had they were the cool kid. They were the cool kid on the block. You knew the cool kid on the block because you were around their house a lot. Yeah, if you had the internet, you were the bee's knees. You were the kid of the block. You had, everybody was around your house, and you know, and it was just to show off how I think having the internet in those days was to show off a cool status because the internet back in those days, I think today's kids wouldn't survive. Because you could only know so much. I mean, yes, you could listen to music and download stuff, but you couldn't, unless you knew where to go, you couldn't really just talk to people online. Um, if you like, if you were 15 or below, if you were 15, you were all right online, but if you were below, people didn't want to know you. That was it. That was the way it was. I mean, yes, there were creeps, we'll call them that, but it wasn't, it was the only way they could get at you is if you sent them stuff, because that's what they wanted. But that was a very different time. The internet was very, very different, and it was much more cooler. You had to search. You had to search for stuff. You couldn't just. It wasn't just like now where you pop it all up and it's all there, right there. No, 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 no. Not back then. It wasn't. And we'll talk about that. My use of the internet a bit more, but I'm just telling you what it was like. Um, you were more into PlayStation back then and magazines. Kids used to read magazines back then. I know it's very different now. Magazines, what are they? Kids would be saying. But no, magazines were really, really cool. They weren't this. They didn't have this corporate look like magazines have today. No, there was really cool. There was puzzles. There was stories. There was every magazine had an agony aunt in, no matter which magazine you read. Um, Even the video game magazines. I'm stuck on what was it, Tomb Raider. How do I get across this puzzle? In fact, we knew that before the magazines because we played the game properly. But these were things that were really cool. So bear that in mind. Now the television, when I started watching the television, right, there was no on demand, right? There was no on demand. There was no, there was no catch up, right? There was no on demand and there was no catch up when I started watching television. You had to know what time your program was on. We had a video recorder, right? What we did was we recorded a lot of programs. You had to have a good library of videotapes to get by. You had to have a fantastic library of video games, and you also had to have a fantastic knowledge and library of music because you'd be buying music, you'd be buying video games, you'd be buying videotapes, and had to know what time your program was on because that was when you would be watching it. Otherwise, you'd miss it. You'd have to, if it wasn't on, you'd have to have the video recorder handy. If that was, if you had one, if you didn't, then tough luck. You just had to know when the program was on. And, the cool kids had video recorders, they had everything. But anyway, we were semi-cool. We had what we needed. That will say that much. We had video recorders. You've got to remember, things were dearer in those days. You know the big screen TVs that you've got in your living room? If you wanted one of those in 98, you had to have a lot of money. Yeah. Um, but 5 years later or 4 years later, TVs came down in price, and especially for a certain Doctor Who episode. So stay strapped in because we're going to talk about Doctor Who. We're going to cover from 98 to 2004, 2005, I think. So starting 98, what programs, 98, 99, what was around? Well, we had Sky TV, but not the Sky you know today. It was very different. Some channels shared other channels. Nickelodeon shared with Paramount and Nick Jr. and CBBC, strangely enough. Um, oh yeah, I'm going to do a bit of a lost media section on this channel soon. I'll be talking about the BBC and Nickelodeon. That was a funny one. That was a really funny one. And yeah, um, but the Teletubbies actually aired on Nickelodeon for a spell because they bought the license. But yeah, that's another story that I'll tell. Yeah, in another day, another day, another dollar. But um, now we started watching like shows we watched on Nickelodeon were because I was a Nickelodeon kid. I grew up with Rugrats. I grew up with Doug and Ren and Stimpy, and then I watched what my sister watched because we had to share the television. You know, um, and that's another thing. We had three televisions in the house, but Dad was watching his programs. My sister would watch her programs, and then I'd have to watch just what people wanted to watch. I couldn't watch what I wanted, not necessarily, not unless it was when I came home from school, the TV was all mine, and I watched Rugrats, Angry Beavers, Rugrats, Doug, and Ren and Stimpy, and they were my programs, and Postman Pat, and they were my programs. But I really liked babyish programs. I could follow them. I loved them. I loved Arthur, and I loved. That was this is the TV I loved. Um, but I was forced to watch things like Sabrina and Sister Sister, and I hated those shows, but I had to watch them. And yeah, so like I said, they were my shows that I watched, and um, I'm trying to think of other stuff before I move on to the culture that I'm going to really talk about. Um, yeah, see, SpongeBob came out in '99, but I missed that era of Nickelodeon. Now, I want to talk about something which is on YouTube. I'll put it in the show notes. There was a film that aired on Nickelodeon. And do you know, does anyone remember this? I remember it did air in the UK. Nickelodeon used to have a movie on a Friday night. They used to have a movie. It would be Sabrina the Teenage Witch, mainly, or the Rugrats movie, or something like that. But there was this one time that we probably all remember and wish we didn't. And I remember it a few years ago, and I've seen the film. It's on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing. There's a film called Cry Baby Lane. And I remember we watched a bit of it and we thought, what on earth is this? Is this Nickelodeon? Are they airing this? Maybe this is Paramount. Maybe sometimes Paramount used to put their films on the Nickelodeon slot for some reason. They started doing that. Paramount started doing that. Now, this is before streaming. This is before, like now, if you go on a streaming site, adults can watch their films on the same site as the kids watch theirs. But we're going back. We're going back way before streaming. Wait, there was again. Oh yeah, there was no streaming either. There was none of that. Like there were films on the internet, but nobody watched them. They were very low, very poor audio. It was like, oh, how can I describe it? It's like, you know those really crappy film cameras? It's like one of them. It was like really poor quality. Like no one ever, never watched those things. So streaming didn't exist entirely. Like I said, you had to know when your program was. You had to know. You had to be in the know. If you wanted to watch, I don't know, went for anybody. If you wanted to watch Bargain Hunt at 3 in the afternoon, per se, you had to be in at 3 afternoon, or you had to have your VCR set to that. So yeah, you know, and yeah, 38 years of age, I know what a VCR is because that's what we live by. But good cartoons. There were good cartoons on. There was good cartoons. There was cartoons. There was some scary moments in those cartoons. I tell you, there was that one Rugrats episode called "In the Dreamtime," and my gosh, they must have stole Wes Craven's stuff because we weren't watching horror films when we saw that episode, and oh my goodness me! And I remember watching that episode, and my favorite bit is, "I'm not Tommy," and I thought, is that an Angelica voice? But it was too high for Angelica, and I just thought, whoa, this episode is real, real creep factor. But I liked that, I liked those scary moments in kid shows. Kid shows don't have scary moments now. They don't want to scare and freak kids out. And talking about freaking kids out, I just want to talk about one thing: the witch in Granny's Garden. Oh, Granny's Garden was an educational. It was an adventure game, but every school had it. Um, every classroom in the country had Granny's Garden, and Granny's Garden was a rite of passage when we played that in the classroom. I remember, and we were PlayStation kids. We loved the BBC Micro because of its graphics. And when we played Granny's Garden, I was like, oh my goodness grief, what on earth is that? you know, it was like your worst nightmare. Very cool. And there was another bit of nightmare fuel, the original Humpty Dumpty. Oh, nightmare fuel, nightmare fuel. And yeah, so, um, and there was we had proper nightmare fuel. Proper. We had I remember we had in French class, um, we had the Count Dracula song, and we also had the um, the screaming face. One of my friends did. They had the screaming face. Un, deux, trois, quatre, cinq, and as you get to cinq, this face pops up. There's all kinds of great stuff. So I'm going to focus more on cartoons. Now, I'm going to take you into the 2000s now, um, when things were like Sky Digital was new, there were brand new channels, there were brand new cartoons, there were brand new bands. Um, MTV was a thing. There were channels, the kids who watched, there was kids who watched MTV, there was kids who watched Kerrang, there was kids who, you know, um, and the music we bought. I remember when I wanted all the metal music in 2000, like the early 2000s. And being a metal kid came with its perks. Because I was listening to heavy metal and also I was watching shows like Rugrats and Fairly Odd Parents. But there used to be, oh no, I wasn't watching those shows yet. I was watching Playhouse Disney. So I was watching Roly Poly Oly and I was watching um, Spider Man on Disney Channel, and I was watching uh, Kim Possible, and we hadn't got to Phineas and Ferb yet. We hadn't got to those really cool stuff. Again, that's another episode. But um, I was watching that, and then I was watching Nick Jr. stuff and CBBC stuff. Um, CBBC Choice, I started watching stuff on that. And then I watched stuff on Nick Jr. and Playhouse Disney and Cartoon Network. Um, things like Dexter's Lab, um, Dragon Ball Z, Beyblades. Beyblades was a culture. Okay. I want to talk briefly on Beyblades because I'm going to do a whole. Me and Andy, we're doing an episode on Beyblades because we both we're just getting into it, and Beyblades has got a whole brand new community. Um, it's now got a culture which it never had before. Um, yeah, so it just had that culture, um, which Beyblades never had. They always had, Beyblades were always, it's just a cartoon and a toy. Um, no, it's just done by Hasbro. And we got the toys. We got the Beyblade Arena, and we got the Beyblade and the Rip Guard. And I remember there were all different types of Rip Guards and Rip Cords. There was a launcher and a Rip Guard, and then the Beyblade had a bay and a weight and everything. I'm just getting into all that. And then there was the bit beast to stick on the blade. They had all different powers. And there was the cartoon series. But I think now that series has become a lifestyle, which is real interesting, which I'll talk on in um, another episode because again, you start talking about Beyblades and it becomes half an episode. But we also had um, growing up, we also had um, Dragon Ball Z. Now, I wasn't a massive Dragon Ball Z fan, but I used to watch it. I used to watch the show, and it was very violent and gory for a cartoon. But it was, I loved the scenes, I loved the sounds, I loved the soundtrack, and I just thought, wow, I unfortunately didn't get into it properly enough. because again, it was never on the times that it was always on when I could never watch it. So when I did watch it, I did watch it, and I remember watching it on a Saturdays. Every Saturday, I would watch Dragon Ball. I remember saying to my mummy at the time, "Oh, I want Dragon Ball Z on," and we'd put Dragon Ball Z on and the two episodes, and then I'd watch Scooby Doo, and that was actually what I'd watched. And then I went upstairs and listened to my music and played the PlayStation. Um, but yeah, and again, there was some great consoles of that era. There was the PS2 was coming in, and the PS2. I sort of missed the PS2 era. I've sort of relived it now, but the PS2 was this amazing console. It was you could watch DVDs on it, and you could. I think I lost interest at that time because I knew what it could do. The Dreamcast, you could watch DVDs on the Dreamcast, but the Dreamcast was a console that went online. The PS2 was not much of that. It was more of it was a like better than the PS1, and like the graphics was better, and the games were better, and the lifestyle was better. You know, you had a PlayStation 2, you were the kid, you were Mr. or Mrs. Cool, and everybody went round your house and they played the games, and they had the snacks, and they had the cool music, and yeah, and they had the cool lifestyle, and they had you were cool, whatever that was, and you knew what life was in that way because you and sometimes if you had the best gaming library, um, if you had an Xbox, you weren't really cool back then. But we're talking, we're talking that era, and we're gonna we're gonna talk about the cartoons that I was watching. Um, Maybe some of the music I was listening to. So at that time, well, before I was listening to sort of Sabbath and stuff like that, Limp Bizkit, Nickelback, and Nirvana. And at this time, um, Killswitch Engage, um, and Metallica, and Rage Against the Machine. And at this time, Slipknot had just brought out a new album, and they were the band to listen to at that time. Now, in 2003, which is when we started watching really cool cartoons, this was the year. Beyblades was on at 5 o'clock, replacing Dragon Ball Z. Um, Dexter's Lab was on. On Nickelodeon, we had SpongeBob. And SpongeBob was not just a show, it became culture at that point. Also, there was a band called the White Stripes. They did Seven Nation Army. We also had Dick and Don in the Bungalow. They were on a Saturday mornings, and every kid in the UK was stuck in front of the TV on a Saturday morning to watch Dick and Don do all their stupid stuff. And we would laugh. And when you spoke Dick and Don, unfortunately, I wasn't really into Dick and Don until later on. But, again, we'll come to that as well because that was that was part of culture, part of culture. Um, and the cartoons we watched, like SpongeBob, was one of them. You had to, it was on Nickelodeon, but it was also on CITV. Um, we also had All Grown Up, which was a Rugrats spin-off. To be honest, I didn't think it was. It was a really good spin-off, but I really wish they didn't really work all that much on it. I thought All Grown Up was good, but not as good as we expected. And yeah, um, so yeah, um, and there was things like the Fairly Odd Parents, Jimmy Neutron. If you watched Jimmy Neutron, you were a cool kid. There was Hey Arnold. Like I'd watched Hey Arnold in the '90s, but in the 2000s we were watching it more. And yeah, and then there was the Wild Thornberrys, which the like I've not seen a show any cooler than the Wild Thornberrys. But yeah, um, and yeah, there were shows that I missed out on. Growing up, I remember there was a space show in the early 2000s, which I think it was like the dawn of the millennium. But I thought it was like a really cool show, and it was like aired just before Sabrina. But yeah, um, so yeah, um, and I thought the cartoons at the time were like pretty cool. Um, like the Rugrats in Paris. I thought that was such a better Rugrats film than the first one because of the way they heavily, the animation was so much more detailed. They weren't using CGI for that, but they were, there was so much more in that. And it was like, wow. Um, yeah. And so, yeah, and at that time, you know, we loved seeing guitars in cartoons. Every time there was someone playing a guitar in a cartoon, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. But um, I think the cartoons like they were just like really really cool. But then there was a show towards when I left school. There was a show that came on the BBC. It came back, and do you know what show that was? In 2005, it was uh, towards the end of 2005. Sorry, start of 2005, and that was a show called Doctor Who. Doctor Who made a massive comeback, and every Saturday evening, the nation would glue itself to the screen, wondering if the Daleks ever come back to our screens. Now, I've got to say, right, um, I'd seen Daleks Invasion of Earth, the movie, and I thought, wow, a film. And I got the series somewhere of Daleks Invasion of Earth. I don't think I've got rid of that. And if I have, then ouch. But yeah, that is it was such a detailed series. The film was not as detailed, but um, the sounds, the score for the film is just about as amazing as I mean, Doctor Who and music score and film score and everything we start geeking out here on Doctor Who. And I was real proper Doctor Who fan. I'd gone from being a Star Wars fan to being a Doctor Who fan. And I had a Dalek. I had K9 for a bit. But yeah. And when we do the website, I'm going to do an episode purely on the Doctor Who shrine. what we've seen, what we haven't seen, what we liked, what we didn't, and all the rest of that. But I'll just say now, when we saw in 2006 or 2007? No, 2006 it was. Um, we saw Daleks v Cybermen, and what an episode that was! And it was amazing. It was tearful. It was on the edge of your seat all in one episode, and I thought, wow, it was amazing. Um, but yeah, um, so yeah, and then they brought Davros back a series later. Um, but yeah, um, but because there was that whole thing with Captain Jack, and they wouldn't want to kill him off. Well, not in Doctor Who, I don't think. Maybe in Torchwood, but I was never really a big Torchwood person. I was more Doctor Who, and I thought Torchwood was. I never really got into it. I tried um, watching a bit of Torchwood, but that's part of the whole Doctor Who lore, isn't it? But yeah, um, and so yeah, um, so yeah, Doctor Who. Um, we'll be talking more Doctor Who in the follow episode because I missed a lot on Doctor Who, but I did, see a few things, and there's a lot of more anime and special effects and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll leave that till another episode because get me on animation, it gets sort of more geekier than what I'm actually talking about here. Um, so I don't know what to cover really. I've just spoke a lot of stuff, and uh, there's so much I haven't really covered, and haven't really covered any actual bases here. But um, that's what I want to talk about in this episode is the whole thing, the um, whole lore of that. So there was Doctor Who, and when Doctor Who came out, um, that we were getting slowly into the world of the VCR recorders were phasing out by that point when Doctor Who came on the scene, and people started getting big screen TVs, not just to watch Doctor Who, but apparently when in the 2006 when that episode with the Cybermen on it, Cybermen v Daleks, everyone the televisions, the big screen TVs came down in price just for that episode, and the nation was in. Now we had a World Cup at that year, um, and strangely enough, there was an England match uh, a week after that episode, or before. That's right, there was an England match before that episode. There was an England match, and then there was Daleks v Cybermen. You couldn't put it like any more, could you? You know, there was England versus Germany, and then there was Daleks v Cybermen. It was it was a whole. It was like you couldn't have painted a better picture of that year. Um, Now, I was a Star Wars kid growing up. Um, the one thing I missed about 98, 99 was I saw the Phantom Menace movie. This is how old I am. I saw the Phantom Menace in cinemas, and what an amazing film that was! What an experience to go to the cinema. You would go to a cinema. You wouldn't just wait for it to come on streaming services. I mean, people now, you go into a cinema, people like that feel. But you go into a cinema now, there's only about two or three people in the whole cinema. But back then, cinemas would fill. You know, the Phantom Menace. It was difficult to get a seat. We had to book it, and we went to the MEN Manchester Evening News Arena to watch Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. There was a massive screen, right? This is something I've missed. Now, by that point, I had Kellogg's collectibles. This is what's going on the website, by the way. The Star Wars Shrine's going to have the Kellogg's collectibles. I wanted a Millennium Falcon. I still want a Millennium Falcon to this day. Do you know how hard it is to get a Millennium Falcon, even a cheap one? Do you know how hard it is to get one? Well, it's hard. But we are going to try and get a picture of a Millennium Falcon. And we will get one and we will put it on. We don't want a fake one. We want a proper Millennium Falcon picture for our shrine. I believe people have had like C3PO letters. I'd love some of those for the shrine. Um, Stuff like that. Stuff like just little bits and pieces. But yeah. But anyway, going to the cinema. You go to the cinema now. My real dad at the time lived in Manchester. We we would go from his house in Manchester to the Manchester Evening News. We had you would go in and you would buy a popcorn bucket, not just popcorn buckets are big, but we're talking the popcorn buckets back then. They were a bucket. They were an actual bucket. You would never finish the popcorn. And we never throwed our popcorn. We never throwed it. Um, and we would watch the film. And I took just for the experience, I took my Kellogg's C3PO along to hold by watching the film. How cool is that, right? I had my C3PO with me, my Kellogg's C3PO with me while I was watching The Phantom Menace. And what a cool film. And we had proper sound. In the cinemas in those days, you used to have it blaring out, not at volume 12 or 13. It was like really loud, proper bass, all that kind of thing. An experience that you get in an IMAX type, and the screen was huge. You didn't have to sit at the front just to see the screen. We sat in a really good seat. We had proper view of the Phantom Menace, and we came home pretty tired, and we were talking about it the whole weekend. I remember going to school on Monday, and I was not allowed to talk about the film because my friends hadn't seen it yet, so I had to sort of keep all hushed up about the film. Um, yeah, so that's one thing. Now we'll just have a little break to talk about the website, if you don't mind. I've spoke about it at the beginning of this podcast, but I'm going to talk about it right here. Right, who wants a free audio book service where we read Star Wars stories, Doctor Who stories for the blind and visually impaired. Who wants that? I know that stuff's already out there, but who wants Star Wars stories read to them? Who wants comics read to them? Who wants really cool stuff? Do you want an audio book of Beyblade information? Please let me know what you want, and we'll get it done. We're gonna get some people to read these books, and we're gonna actually get it done. And there'll be a free downloadable copy, and then hopefully there will be for those that want it. There'll also be a pen drive service because we're going to do, hopefully, this is going to be the later idea of the website where we put our stuff on memory sticks for people who want it. The podcasts won't go on memory sticks, but these audio books will, and it'll be a subscription service where you don't pay anything, but then we just have you down on the subscription service where you have all these audio books read to you. I was going to do like make some Yotto cards, but haven't even got a Yotto, but that'd be something cool, wouldn't it? So getting back to the 2000s, let's finish this dead quick. So basically, the last year, not the last year, the last part of 2003, 2004, like the cartoons are really good. We got SpongeBob. Oh, we got a SpongeBob movie. We had the SpongeBob movie. Now, I didn't get to go to the cinema to see that, but the SpongeBob movie, like the first one they did, was the only decent SpongeBob movie they've ever done. They've always failed at doing a SpongeBob movie, but that had the Motorhead song in it, didn't it? That was another thing as well. And yeah, so SpongeBob and the Big Wave, it's called. And my favourite one is my favourite line out of that movie is Patrick going, "We know how to weed him out," you know, and the song "We're a goofy goofer," yeah. I love the rock version of that at the end, but yeah, uh, we're all goofy goopers, yeah. I love the little now that we're men, SpongeBob and Patrick thinking they're men and they're not, and then David Hasselhoff and that. I think everything about that film, I absolutely, it was like again, it was a rite of passage. SpongeBob movie, and you know, and crumbs, what was going on? What else was going on? There was like we went out and bought CDs. If there was a new, um, I mean, there was always a new. At that time, I think was there a new Ozzy album? I think. Oh, the Osbournes. The Osbournes were a thing, and I remember on um, what cartoon was it that took the rip out the Osbournes? Oh, what was it? That will really annoy me because I can't think now. Um, but I remember on, oh, that was it. Um, on CBBC, they had, and this is going to come later, but I've got to mention this. They had a dog called Hacker, and he would always take the mick out of Ozzy Osbourne at any given moment. Um, but yeah, I think we never really saw Ozzy Osbourne on any kids show. We saw Lemmy on Nickelodeon. Um, that was cool. Um, so yeah, now I'm gonna finish this podcast, but I think I've spoken enough. I've given you the history. I've more or less covered a lot of stuff. SpongeBob, you know, was what I was into, um, and and Spider Man, and um, I'm trying to think. But then I would listen to stuff like Disturbed and Metallica and Slipknot and all that sort of stuff. And um, and yeah, and I would watch SpongeBob, and I'm trying to think of any actual media at the time. There was a lot of really cool stuff in PlayStation media. I mean, going back to the 90s, I remember when we heard about all brand new games that were coming out, and stuff like Star Wars games. Um, I stopped reading PlayStation magazine in the late 90s because they were always talking about the latest graphics and stuff. But you know, it was a very very different time, and it wasn't mostly on game releases. It was more on what we were going to see in a game, how the feel and the mechanics of the game were going to look like. Um, like Tomb Raider 3 was big news. Um, Tekken was big news. I remember Tekken 3 was like, wow, that was a big game, and it was um, the graphics and the soundtrack and the characters and the sounds and the just everything about the game was like every time they made a Tekken game, they just made it look more sleeker than the last one, and it was just like wow. Um, but they did that with most games, you know. Um, but yeah, I think that was most of the thing. Um, Music, I was getting into metal in the early 2000s, but there was a band called the Gorillaz in the 2000s, and when they came out, everybody loved them. Like everybody loved the Gorillaz. It changed. everything. When their music came out, there it was a whole new revolution. Like the Gorillaz reshaped media. Um, like you wouldn't think Damon Albarn from Blur could do such a thing, but he did. Um, and then we had um, Eminem causing controversy. Obviously, that was big. Do you know, like I mean, you think now all the brain rock culture causes controversy, but no, Eminem was causing controversy in the 2000s. We had Marilyn Manson. Um, we had Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit, who was complaining about everything, and we had, um, and then we had Ozzy Osbourne, obviously, um, and just one thing to wrap it all up. Ozzy Osbourne, when he played at the Jubilee, once Ozzy Osbourne finished, that was the television off. And that was it. He came on to do what was it? Paranoid. Um, but then I liked the end of it when what was it? Ray Davis came on, and then Brian May from the Palace Roof, um, and Tony Iommi said he was invited to do that on the roof, but just one lead to go, just one, he's a brave man to do all that. But yeah, the Jubilee was memorable. Just listening to Ozzy on stage do Paranoid, and apparently I heard Tony Iommi talk about that, because it was hard for Ozzy not to swear, and the hardest bit for Ozzy was, you know, if you hear Ozzy at live shows, clap your effing hands, and apparently the hardest bit for Ozzy was, come on, clap your hands, come on, clap your hands. And if you listen to it live, that's what he says, come on, clap your hands. But um, if you hear him at a live show, it's a lot worse than that. But you can imagine that was Ozzy rehearsing it in the dressing room, And Tony Iommi said it was the funniest moment was that, you know. And they have all the rules, don't they? No drinking, no drugs, no swearing. And the no swearing is I think that was the hardest part for Ozzy. Bless him. Um, so what else did we have? Crumbs. Um, actually, I said I was wrapping up there, and I'm wrapping up there. So we've literally done the 90s to the 2000s. I think there's one thing that I did forget that I want to put on. I want to talk about was the arcades. Now, you kids today, when you go into an arcade today, um, you might see, they've got some cool games in an arcade. Don't get me wrong, but we knew what was cool in an arcade. We knew the arcades did far more than the consoles. You know, we knew that for real. And in the arcades, you know, you got the experience. It wasn't just going in and putting a coin into a machine. it was a whole lot more than that. Because you had kids screeching, you had there was so much. You could go and get an ice cream. You could go and um, ride a little rocking horsey thing. Um, People competed. People, it was like a day out. You'd go in the arcades and um, you know, you had to know you're getting. I mean, I remember going on Time Crisis with somebody once, and we were competing, and this guy I was playing against, he wasn't dying, and he had. I was like, how's he getting more kills? This was something like, and the arcade games, they just had so much more. The soundtracks, the you know, and there were people that lived in these arcades, like not lived and slept per se, but they would be in there and they would be the ones that wanted to, they wanted to be competitive. The competitive ones, they were the first in the arcades. They were the first. They were the first machine. If there was a big queue at an arcade machine, you walked away because you would be, if you were going to play at that machine, you'd walk away crying your eyes out because those kids, they could play. The ones that walked in, they had the most change in their pockets. They were the ones that were going to make the other kids cry with the best moves, with the best cheats. They knew the machines better than you did. And one last thing, because obviously I've got to leave, talking about things that are going to make you cry your eyes out, and this will ruin your culture. The fairground. Now, coming from Southport, which is a seaside town, I never went on this ride, but we had the Traumatizer. Now, you could see that ride from a mile off. Um, if you ever got lost in Southport, all you have to do is look at the Traumatizer. But we had some really good rides. We had the Ghost Train. We had the Caterpillar, which was like a wagon train, um, you know, um, and we had the and then we had a ride called Black Hole, which was the whirl, but it was a really good ride. The Ghost Train, the proper Ghost Train, and the Funhouse. Now, the Funhouse was literally, you could smell the Funhouse before you went in there. Smell of sweaty socks. But oh my gosh, that was a rite of passage going in there. Going on stairs that moved, the slides that there's all types of slide in there, and the social mixer. And I was really scared of that thing, but by the end of it, I was going on it. And the table that you had to try and stay on, the record disc, the barrel. We've worked out that if you stuck yourself onto the barrel, you could go all the way up. And kids used to make that go faster by rotating it manually. They're going faster, faster, and there'd be a kid outside rotating it manually, like, ah, and you'd be sliding around the barrel. Um, so yeah, I had to end with that because, um, it was the funhouse was, and the fairground. The fairground was a place you really wanted to go to, um, and rides like Tagadar and Black Hole and the Haunted Swing. The Haunted Swing was like, wow, that was brilliant. You'd sit in this room and you'd just sit there and the whole room would move. And um, you know. But yeah, the haunted swing. I wonder if there's anyone that actually got flung around the room below. Um, so anyway, they're just little memories. They're just little things. They're just little bits to put in. Um, and you know, and some great stuff, obviously, or maybe not so great. So yeah, in the next episode, I'm gonna do the 2010s, um, where we'll talk about animation. We'll talk about music more. There'll be less guitars and more synths and more drum machines. Anyway, that's it for now. Bye.